those of you who are new listeners, my name is Charity Chafee. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Massachusetts, and we are here today to talk about teens in treatment, working with families. We interview providers, parents, all the people in terms of teens, and we are here today with Rachel Hughes. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell me who you are, where you're from, all of the good things for our audience?
Absolutely. So I'm Dr. Rachel Hughes, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and child mental health specialist in Washington State and certified autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist. And and I've been in practice for about 15 years now. I've taken a transcontinental journey. I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina and got my undergrad in Raleigh, North Carolina, moved back home after a health event and got my master's there in marriage and family therapy, which was kind of an accident. And I loved it and just felt really good in that. And people love when I tell them that my bachelor's degree is in zoology.
Mine's in biology.
Oh, that's so cool. See, it's not that different. It's not that different.
You're like telling me your story, and I was like, I impulsively signed up for this program to become a therapist, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. And it's so funny that you're like, I did it too, and I was like, and we're bio majors. Come on,
that's a rare find, by the way. But yeah, absolutely, like don't regret that at all. And then I was about to move out to Seattle, Washington, with my partner at the time, when I was about to graduate, and my program director pulled me aside and said, I think you need to go to a doctorate program. And I'm like, fine, I'm a nerd, I'll do it. And I do love systems theory, I want to understand more. And so I did my doctorate in St. Louis University in medical family therapy, where I got to work in like doctor's offices and the community clinic in St. Louis, which was a huge experience and amazing, with an incredible set of faculty and other peers. Then I continued to be ambitious, I guess, and instead of just writing my dissertation, I took on a pre-doctoral fellowship while I was writing my dissertation in Grand Junction, Colorado, and at St. Mary's medical residency. And so I helped train medical residents as well on behavioral health care. I started actually like a child-focused program. That was my elective in my fellowship because I just have always loved kids and especially teenagers. And then I moved to Washington in the Seattle area in 2018 and have been here ever since and have like jumped around at different jobs. And right now I have my private practice where I do work primarily with neurodivergent families and their teenagers. And I also started a mental health cooperative for neuroaffirming providers because we wanted to do a more just leadership. And so my friend Haley that I mentioned that I sent the crusty dogs to is the co-founder. We have a lot of mutual interests. And so we started Divergent Minds Collective last year, actually. And that's been going really well. And then this year I've been a little bit burned out at the beginning of the year, as I know many people have. And I got a little heartbroken by seeing how therapists were responding and taking on more capitalistic ventures at the expense of clients. And so I also started a CEU organization for more just anti-oppressive CEUs. So, I roll with it, right? You probably don't have to guess that I am definitely an ADHD adult.
I'm sorry, I'm dying because I'm just like, we are so matched on this because I'm like, and this, and this, and this.
We're best friends now, it seems, right?
We are best friends and I'm obsessed with you. So get that out of the way. Okay. You are very accomplished. You do all the things.
I do all the things, and it doesn't feel like accomplishment really, but just like the thing to do in front of me. And then when I see something that I want to fix, I'm like, can I fix this? And I do if I can. And so your plate just gets really full sometimes. And so I would say that like I am gifted to have like all these things that I really truly love, and like including being a clinician, even though I'm also a supervisor. But I love my families. I love teaching clinicians, and I love creating alternate ways of doing things that are more just. And so my plate is full with like incredible things.
It honestly sounds like it. Like you were talking about all these things, and I was like, yup, 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 yup. I get it, and it's so needed. It's so needed. I was just talking to Bianca about how like one of the things that I think we are missing maybe the most is like really competent, supportive supervision that's not just case focused, but it's about like who you are in those sessions and what you're experiencing. And it's one thing that I miss so much because when I worked residential, I like was supervising interns, supervising first years, like loved the process of helping to support somebody else to like move their goalpost a little bit in terms of like what their goals were and where they saw themselves and what their work was and how to think about things differently. And I love that now. Like I do consultations and supervision all week and I'm just like I love this work because I do think that there is such a way to do it where you don't have to, because I don't know what you were told in grad school, but when I was in grad school, they were like, don't use yourself, right? Like present with a blank slate. Don't talk about this and don't use your personality and don't swear, right? And like always come just like very professional. And here I am, right? Like 14 years later, cussing session and talking to all these kids about different things and really like using myself in ways that like it's like really supporting their journey. And so like I'm always like, okay, but we can have the best of both worlds, right? Like we can be human, we can be our authentic selves. And I think that's one thing that I love working with teens about is that like I want to be authentic in session. I want them to show up as their authentic self in session. And like we can just vibe with whatever we need to work on. And I'm not asking them to like mask and do this and be professional and whatever. So
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's actually the one way to like ruin teen therapy is to try and be traditional and put on the fake mask of like, yes, I'm Dr. Hughes. Like nobody knows me as that. I know that I know that it's like a professional if they're reaching out to me that way and a professional that doesn't know me, but I am Rachel full and foremost because like titles are unnecessary. And it is really about just like being in the room with people. And teenagers are like the best at sniffing out imposters. And they're already mean sometimes. So I don't want them to come at me for being fake.
okay. I've certainly had my fair share of like really mean clients. And I actually think that it's such an interesting thing to work with and roll with. And I think that there is a lot of clinicians have a very reactive response. I think like when teenagers are mean, but I actually really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's an opening, right? So it's a clinical opening. And so especially with my autistic teens that are practicing their social scripts, I know that I've made myself a safe figure if they're willing to like unmask and like try something that is a little bit mean, or that I've really like stepped on something that I shouldn't have stepped on, and then I make a repair. But I remember a couple of weeks ago, I had a session where this kid was very mad at me because we were doing some more intensive OCD work. And before we walked into the room, she looked at me and she said, I can see all the lines around your eyes. Why do you look like a pug? And like you have, I can't even remember what she said at this point, but it was an intense day. And she itemized all of the ways in which I looked old. And it was like, okay, so you're not feeling well, are you?
I can see your anxiety is coming up about all of
Yeah, exactly. Like, would you like to do something different today? Because we can use words. How does this relate to you making friends and struggling to make friends? Do you say things like this to other people? And so it's just like everything is always a really good opening. And my teens absolutely hate that I can just like zoom right in there with the openings.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad you brought this up though, because I actually think that this is one of the skills that I work with on parents a lot is how to use any of those things as an opportunity, right? And I think that there are so many people and probably younger clinician me to some extent as well, right? Because I've learned a lot as I've grown, where there would be something that was said and I would be like, I would have a reaction that didn't necessarily get underneath of the thing. It would just kind of like address the thing. And then as I got, stronger, more confident as a clinician, I understood things more. I really like it's not really about me. I like know that. And so like I spend a lot of time like diving underneath of it. And I think that like parents often are reacting to the thing that's said instead of understanding the undercurrent. And so like that is such an important parent skill for them to be able to do is like anything that your kid is saying is actually an opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have you read Parenting from the Inside Out by Dan Siegel and Tina, I can't remember her name, but she's a parent educator. I think about that so much, just how it's really our ego that responds to things, or reacts to things, I should say. And if we can figure out our reaction, like we can liberate ourselves from those things. And so that is like one piece of advice I give in every single parent call that I have is don't take it personally. It's not personal. The brain's not even developed to the point where they really know what they're saying, and it's not meant to be an attack of you as a person. It's meant to make you upset, get under your skin, and to elicit a response. But yeah, 100%.
Well, and I think that's, and I'm actually curious, like how you incorporate parents into treatment for teens, because I think that again, like in grad school, they were like, oh, family therapy, family therapy, family therapy, but unless you went through a really rigorous like family therapy grad program or you did something kind of like outside of grad school, I think that's another giant question people have is like, how do I incorporate parents? How do I talk about this work? And I know that there are plenty of us that do it now, but I love hearing people explain kind of how they like to conceptualize that for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had a really good mentor early in my career who said clinicians typically fall on in one of two camps, which is they want to work only with parents and have no space for the kiddos or the teenagers, or they want to work with just the teenagers and the kids. And so being able to code switch is actually an important skill. And so I have taken that like super seriously and maybe too literally with my neurodivergent brain. But I do think that's my role is code switching between teenagers and their parents. And I know a lot of therapists are worried because of consent laws, reasonably, about how ethical it is to include parents sometimes. But if we're thinking in like systems theory of like how things work together, we have to include parents because teenagers are not, they are dependent creatures and they do not exist without their parents. And so if we're not looking at the whole picture, we are missing a big part of that teen's life. And plus, like I incorporate parents because I want to be able to hear how the parents are doing and help them with basic parenting skills and communication skills. And it helps me also stay more grounded in reality because teenagers, much like adults, are not the most reliable reporters. And so if I have more perspectives, I have a better understanding of the picture and how the pieces are working together. So at the beginning, if I'm working with a teenager, I kind of make a deal with my teens and I say, hey, I understand that you probably, or actually, sorry, I think that's an error that some therapists do is they assume teenagers don't want their parents in the room. And so I start by acting as though parents are part of this from the beginning. And we're talking about what capacity. Because like, so in Washington, we have like an age of consent for mental health treatment of 13. And so that means anybody over 13 can consent for their own mental health care. But how many kids are getting themselves to therapy? And how many kids are getting themselves paid for therapy and have independent insurance? And so it's almost like this kind of fake differentiation. I really appreciate that it allows for like trans teens or in distress teens to seek mental health care. But that's specifically what that low age of consent law is made for. And so I'm talking in the beginning in my informed consent period of like, it'll probably be beneficial to have mom and dad or mom and mom or whomever's in the parent system in our conversations somehow because we can work together and change how you're feeling a little bit. But really what I believe is that parents have a big impact on how you feel. And so I can help you navigate conversations with parents. I can speak on your behalf while you're learning how to, and I can translate what parents are saying. So very long answer to your question, but in all of the ways I possibly can.
This is the conversation we need to have more of, right? Because I think that like I've certainly seen the posts in different groups where people are like really panicked about like, this parent wants to meet with me, but I don't want to violate confidentiality, right? Or like, like this parent wants to do family sessions, but I don't know how to do that, right? And I think that there is a lot of fear and concern around liability, around privacy policies, around confidentiality, right? And I get that. And I think that often leads clinicians to being like, well, I'm just not going to do it. Right?
Exactly. The avoidance of clinicians.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. But then it leads you in this really weird space where you're like, okay, so you're supporting the teen and
Mhm.
you're working on stuff from home, but you don't necessarily have the lens from the
Mhm.
parents. And then at the same time, like you as another adult outside of this teen can't actually affect change at home because you're not having the conversations that would be helpful.
Exactly, exactly. And
Right. And so
I think about that too, just like how important it is, right? Like I'm there 1 hour a week, maybe 2 hours a week, depending on intensity, and really like parents are there almost all of the other hours that the teens at home. And so why wouldn't I work with the part of their life that is bigger to help them have a bigger impact?
yeah. Well, it's like if I have someone who is like maybe because I do think consent's important. And I also, when I was working my like community mental health days, I did a lot of in-home therapy. And the entire slogan for in-home therapy is like it was like family choice, family voice, right? But what I took from that, honestly, was teen choice, teen voice, right? Because I often feel like parents, for the most part, already have a say in treatment because they get to choose the provider, they get to drive the kid there, they get to do whatever. And it's really the teen where I'm just like, what do you want out of this, right? Like, how can I support you in this space at home, in school, whatever, right? And I think that for me, it's so important to like get consent in the beginning and to talk about the structure and the framework of how we include parents and why we include parents and then what would that even look like, right? So like I always tell my teens, I'm like, look, I'm not going to talk to your parents unless you know about it in advance, right? And I will ask you if there are things you want me to bring up, anything you want me to cover. I don't have to talk about certain situations. I can give like themes that are happening, right? Or I can like mention something that I think might be like a formulation for me that would be helpful. And like once they understand what that's going to look like, I feel like a lot of teens are like, okay, cool. I just like don't want you to tell them that I like, I don't know, had sex the other day or whatever. And it's like, no, like that's not pertinent information for a, for a family consult. But I don't think a lot of new clinicians, a lot of clinicians don't know how to do that, right? And I like your whole bridge. I think you had said like the code switching, right? I always consider myself to be like the bridge between family and teen, right? Where it's like I'm the one that's kind of holding information on both ends, and my job is to help them get closer and closer and closer together until like I don't have to be there as the bridge anymore in that relationship, even if I'm still working with the teen as they get older.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I have one informed consent statement that I always do in my first session, which is taken from Short Term Therapy, the book. I can't remember the author right now, but it's I'm going to be here as long as you need me, and your job is to get rid of me as fast as possible. Because I don't want to be a permanent figure in anybody's life in that capacity. I want them to figure it out and have the family structure and support to do it without me there.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I think too, like the other thing that I've seen a lot in Facebook groups and like other dynamics is that there are a lot of I think clinicians, as you were saying, that kind of side with the teen, and then like the parents become the enemy. But I actually think one of the pieces of work that I love the most is really figuring out, like any fun game, how do we become strong collaborators with parents?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think that understanding our own countertransference with parents or kids is really important as a clinician and isn't well guided in most programs. And
Yeah.
so, unless we're really doing that personal work ourselves, like I think that does lead people to have their bias instead of like trying to be the bridge.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, as you said too, I think like we don't exist in their life forever. Like we're
Mhm.
not the permanent figure, but like I would really hope that after therapy we could get that to be parents.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, with teenagers, like I think part of my job is to help parents understand what is developmentally appropriate of teenagers. And part of that is that teenagers are meant to be little monsters so that it's not as sad to like launch them out of the nest. And so I think I try and normalize that too, right? I don't see myself as fixing teenagers, but more just like educating everyone on the warfare of like, this is normal. I know it's painful. And it is a transition in your family's life.
Sorry, I just that perfect. It was perfect. I totally agree with you. And I think that's a thing like when you have like a kid, right? Little baby, like birth to six, I feel like there's so many resources, so much support, so much like this is what to expect developmentally, right? And then it almost seems like you hit 12 and everyone's like, yeah, I don't know, good luck with that. Like there's just not as much guidance. And so they're like key features that I feel like I'm always covering with parents are really like the milestones we're looking for in teenagers and their development and like what to kind of expect with that, because I feel like a lot of parents are like, well, they're not listening to me anymore. And it's like, yeah, because they're trying to develop their own autonomy, right? And they're like, well, yeah, but they're not doing the dishes the way we've always done the dishes, and it's frustrating. And it's like, yeah, because they're trying to figure out how they want to do the task, right? Like there's so much good work you can do with parents that is even like aside from the session that you're having with the teen and like what they might be talking to you about, right? Because like I think the ed of like how do I support my teenager, what do I expect, how can I integrate this, is so critical when you have a teen in treatment.
Yes, exactly. And something I'd like to remind parents is that if you have a spirited kid who is challenging you on things, that's actually a good sign of a secure attachment, and you've made it safe enough that they can actually push back. And so, would you prefer a compliant child that goes through their entire life following orders and not knowing when to stand up for themselves? Or do you want to weather this teenage period, albeit difficult, of where they're pushing boundaries safely with you?
Yes. Well, and I think two things you had kind of mentioned, which I think are so helpful, is like one, like teens aren't in therapy to be fixed, and nor do teens need to be fixed, right? Like what's happening is that there is a rapidly developing landscape of like new stuff, and like it's not up to us to decide what we get to keep or what they throw away. It's really like how are we going to navigate this, right? And I think one of the core pieces is like if you can, as a parent of a teenager, maintain the relationship and the connection while withstanding all of the other stuff that's happening, you've done a pretty good job, right? Because I really do feel like that connection at the end of the day, the love, the nurturing, teens still want that. They just want it in a different way, or they want it in a way that like feels different.
No, I think that's a really good point too, of just like that is one of the developmental tasks for parents is like, how do I shift from raising a kid that is really dependent on me to in a teenager who starts saying, no, I don't want your help when they don't have all the answers. And so the parent's job is to shift to more of that of a mentor rather than a caretaker. And that's really hard for a lot of parents.
Yeah. The way that I love to explain it is like the difference between like birth to 18 in a vehicle, right, is going to look very different. And so like when they're little tiny babies, they're, rear facing, and you're doing all the decision making and you're doing everything, and you have to make sure the bag is packed and that the food is there and that the car seats is, secured, the temperature is right. Like you're literally focused on everything. And then as they get older, your role in the vehicle is shifting, right? So like at like 8 to 12, you don't have to maybe remind them that they have to use the bathroom. You don't have to bring them their water bottle. Like they can communicate if they're too hot in the vehicle, right? And then like you get to the point where they're 14 and they're sitting in the front seat with you, and you're starting to show them like how you do different things, right? And then 15, 16, they're in the car seat, right? Driving the vehicle, and you're in the passenger seat, right? And you're kind of giving directions and asking, like answering questions they might have, and you're there as a support. And then eventually at 18, you're outside the car. You are the guardrail, right? You are like the last part of this process of just like please don't crash, right? Like, and I think sometimes giving visual descriptors like that is really helpful, because I think parents really struggle, and they feel like they should still be in the driver's seat when their kid is 20.
Yes, absolutely, which is a whole different problem. Um, I, I really like that metaphor. And then I'd add into that, like, I think that it's important to tell parents they're going to crash their car. Like, that's part of this process too. And we're not trying to prevent them. They have to crash and figure it out, because that's part of growing up and learning. They have to be able to develop their own problem solving skills. And so that does involve reckless and bad decisions sometimes. We just hope that they don't make such severe decisions that it changes everything. Um, but a great metaphor. Love it.
It's like one of my favorites because I'm a very visual person, and I feel like when you can explain, it's kind of like when we were talking about how we incorporate families earlier, and I was like, if you brought your car into the mechanic and you said this one cog in this one space is broken, right? If I am going in and I'm just looking at that one cog and I'm just like, no, it's not broken, you're fine, and sending it out, did I actively understand the system enough to change it, right? Because like we're depending on the report of someone who may not understand the entire dynamic that's going on. I don't know a single thing about cars, right? So like if I brought my car in and I was like, this is the one thing that's wrong, it's probably actually I'm wrong, right? And I think that that's part of involving the system is like we really have to get a landscape. The more information we have as providers working with that teenager, the better we're going to be able to help and support and understand and like provide different like, leads and change and whatever.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Um, I'm kind of curious, like what you were like as a teenager.
Oh my
Ready
God.
to shift gears completely.
No, I love this. So I was spicy. Was I mean I struggled with self-harm. I am
Mhm,
like very much I feel like always in active recovery with
mhm,
that because that was part of my journey. And I was a perfectionist, but
mhm.
I was the kid that was like I was in everything but also like dying inside. Like I was like very much this like weird combination. And self-harm was my main method of just like managing and coping. And so like I have been through my own journey with self-harm and at the same time I'm so grateful I had that because I think that like if that wasn't something that I'd experienced, I would probably be dead. Like I hate to say that, but I think that that's really true for me. And I mean, I was in therapy, I did all the things, but my parents were also living their own life and like doing their own things. And, for a variety of reasons, I think I felt like neglected. But I think that that is like so much of why I'm the therapist that I am because I'm just like I went through that and I get it. I get it. It's such a personal nature that it's like I can sit here and I can have all these conversations about self-harm and I can get into all these nooks and crannies. And there's a lot of parents who are like, "Wow, I never thought about it like that." And I was like, "Yeah, sometimes it takes a marathon coach to teach you how to run a marathon, right? Like you wouldn't hire someone who's never run a marathon to teach you how to run a marathon." And so I do feel like I owe so much to younger me, and at the same time, I'm trying to do what younger me probably needed at that point in time. So I was spicy, but what about you?
I love that. I love that. I was pretty spicy too, which I mean isn't surprising, right? Because I think that we often seek out clients of where we got stuck sometimes, and so yeah, what was happening? So in middle school, I was listening to like Murder Dolls and Cradle of Filth after my parents' divorce, which is like my core trauma that I've worked a lot on through my life. It was a very intense divorce and like with consequences. And so I frequented Hot Topic before it started doing lots of cute stuff. And so I loved Hot Topic and Spencer's and had like all the bondage pants and like was just trying to be the yeah, just trying to be the goth kid. And then I went to high school, and I think I shedded some of that, whether it be like that I processed well, or what. And I've always been kind of like an aloof kid. I'll say that like currently too. And what I realized like when I became an adult is because I was an undiagnosed neurodivergent and needed support in school and support with scripts and things like that. And like once that happened for me, in retrospect, everything started making sense. Didn't really like know how to connect with friends in high school, but I had good friends, and felt like everybody else like was playing a game that they had the rules to, and I was like, all right, I guess I'm just gonna go forth. And I was a super high achieving kid, so I was twice exceptional, which I think is kind of a backwards compliment. Yeah, so I dyed my hair a lot, which probably isn't surprising to you. And yeah, that was just such a cool thing. My partner and I were having a conversation recently where a Linkin Park song came on his mix list, and he said, "Yeah, my best friend, he was like living this music, and like I just like it because it sounds good." And I can remember in middle school, like that was my anthem, is all of the Linkin Park songs. I felt them in all of my body, and it was so heartfelt. And so I think that that's also what I've tried to do is shift into like who would I have wanted to talk to, because I did have one therapy session as a teenager, right after my parents' divorce, with a couples counselor that was religiously based. And all I remember is him asking me what I was interested in, and I talked for an hour about Buffy the Vampire Slayer stonewalling him, so that we wouldn't have to talk about anything else. And then after that, I decided I hate therapy. It doesn't make sense. I'm never doing it. And 15 years later, here I am loving being a therapist and helping teens to maybe not hate it as much.
Okay, that tracks. So much of what you just said, I'm just like, yep. I was like the, hot topic girly. I was very much like, the feedback that I received from a lot of people in my family was that I was scaring people.
Oh, oh.
Yep, yep. I was scaring people. Um, Cue total shutdown when I like went to college, where I
Hmm.
just was like trying to just like be everyone's friend and like,
Hmm.
totally non-expressive, whatever. And then it took me a long time to kind of get into this space where it's like, no, fuck that, right?
Hmm.
Like, fuck
Hmm.
that. I don't want to
Absolutely.
be who I'm not.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think it's like such a cool thing to talk to other teen therapists because I'm just sitting here being like, yep, 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 get that, totally. Um, wow, that's like so fun and so cool. And
Yeah,
also,
it's super interesting. I wonder if we did like a survey of other teen therapists, how many people would be like, "Yeah, that's kind of the story." Exactly.
so many of us probably like so I'm sure we'll just you know what, we'll put out a survey and we'll see because now I'm curious. But I think that's it's such an interesting thing because I feel like when I was a teenager, so much of who I was recognized through my accomplishments and not necessarily who I was as a person. Um, and so, like, I'm a very accomplished person at this point, but I also like love who I am and think I'm super fun and I don't care. Like, if someone doesn't like me, like, that's okay. Like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Um, and I think a lot about the conversations or the things that I was told as a teenager. And I was like, man, I wish there was someone there who was like, don't listen to them, right? Like just you be you, you be yourself. Like, and so I think so much of it now when I'm in therapy with teenagers is really like, how do I make them feel so comfortable and like so relaxed that they can just like be their authentic self and that I'm not going to jump down their throat and correct them or like, even with full loop around, even when I'm working with someone, I had this client who I appreciate so much. She's like such a fun human. We've been talking for years around social skills and how we like navigate that. And she just got a diagnosis last year of autism and was very much like, nope, not me, doesn't matter, not going to talk about it. Like, that's not my thing at all. And I was like, that's fine. So we kind of keep talking about other things that were important for her. And then she had this like situation recently that came up socially. And someone had said that she was mean. And I was like, well, what does that mean for you? And it was a really great opportunity. And I used my relationship with her to talk about how I perceived some of that and how I experienced that. And it was like for the first time, she was like, fuck, I didn't realize. And I was like, and that's okay, right? Like I'm not offended. Like I tell the kids I work with, I'm just like, you can pretty much call me everything in the book and I'm just like not gonna blink an eye because I've heard it, seen it, done it. Like it's fine. But it's such an interesting thing to be able to use all of that in session with someone and to like truly understand that and know at the end of the day that it's like you can call me a raging bitch, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Not the worst thing I've heard. Not even today. I love that.
No.
How sweet. I like to think that like our role is also preventing future midlife crises. Because I really think that my conceptualization of midlife crises is that it's people who have just kept on their masks and not really figured out who they are. And so you get to like 40, 45, I don't know when they happen. And then there's like this waking up moment of like, oh my gosh, this isn't my life. I think about like the Talking Head song, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. And I am just like so heartened when like my teenagers embrace something about themselves and they choose to do something that isn't what they think they should be doing because it's not who they are. And like that's freaking beautiful. So thank you for also preventing future midlife crises.
I spend, I mean, this current administration, right? And everything that we're experiencing in the world as a whole. I often find myself sitting here being like, if we could eradicate trauma, right? Like, how much better could the world be if we could eradicate trauma, right? And like, I had in so many ways, a fine life, right? And I didn't understand the difference between big T's and little T's until I was like literally in grad school, right? And I think about my life and I'm like, man, like I had so many little T's that I have accumulated over time, right? And I know how those impacted me, but I'm also like, but what if we didn't have to do that work? What if we could do other work, right? And it's kind of that thing where it's like people always say you have time or you have money, and I'm like, you have trauma that you're working on healing, or you have like life you're working on living. And like I think that as therapy, as a therapist, sometimes we're trying to like encourage both of those, which is fine. But I'm also like, but what if, right? Like, what if we didn't need to do this chronic like intergenerational trauma healing stuff? We could just like truly acclimate to the earth in a way that was like, I don't know, without all of it.
Yeah, like what a beautiful utopian world for sure. And like I wish that so much of just like not never running into a kid that has had a painful past or a painful story and like not I talk about current administration with lots of missed opportunities for therapy. Like it's just amazing to think about how the worst people, I say in quotation marks, are often just the most traumatized people and the ones that weren't supported appropriately and put in really terrible places. So not to empathize with bad behaviors, and I always empathize with like the child that's inside the person that's doing the bad behaviors.
Okay, it's interesting, and we don't have to talk a ton about this if you don't want to, but I think a lot about like the people who carry out school shootings. I feel like that is almost a perfect display of all of these like hidden masked like terrible pain. And again, I'm not trying to sit here and say that it's okay, but I also think that like if we are only reacting to those situations and we are not doing active prevention and really ensuring that people have support and love and care and whatever, then like we're literally just daring them to do it.
I absolutely agree. And like it really is heartbreaking to think about how we're the country with the most school shootings in the world and like that we're unwilling to talk about gun regulation in any capacity and all of the victims of that. And I agree that like the shooters aren't probably bad people, and that is a really unforgivable decision to make that clear too. And like I do think about the disfranchisement of so many people in the United States, just because I live here, and how if we had like better social supports and mental health care and a more community focus, like how people probably wouldn't be in that situation in the first place. So absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like so interesting to me, and I think about that with a lot of things, and like, obviously we know trauma is a really huge part of like what drives people's decision making and functioning, and then at the same time, like mental health is the core of almost everything, and I'm just like, we have so much research, we have so much data, we have so much freaking knowledge, and it just kills me that we're just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Oh, by the way, let's congratulate ourselves on not being professionals in a month in the United States, since we've had our professional status taken away as therapists. I am gonna guess it will change back, but like exactly, it's just constant devaluing of mental health. Yeah, we could talk about for other hours about the insurance system and how it reimburses mental health and hurts both clients and therapists. And we could talk about the broken community mental health system, which is really tragic. Um, and so then we get back to actually what made me so jaded at the beginning of the year, which are therapists that say I'm going to win the game of capitalism and charge too much for my sessions and not do pro bono because the system's not taking care of me. And so we have disenfranchised therapists too, and so it's all this recursive cycle and system. And so I have a lot of empathy for everybody trying to survive in this effed up system.
Yeah. No, it's hard, but I also think like there's no one right way to navigate it, but I do think that there
100%.
are so many things to consider, right? Like
Yes.
I hate the insurance game. It's awful.
Absolutely.
Also,
Absolutely. Exploitive.
oh, like the fact that like I had a nutritionist at one point that I was working with who was
Oh, cool.
lovely,
Mhm.
lovely, nothing about her, lovely. And she knew I was a therapist. And so we were talking about reimbursement rates, right, between insurance companies. And now I've never taken insurance because I didn't want to fight that fight. I was like, I'd rather
Get it.
offer
I get it.
a sliding scale. I'd rather offer
Hmm.
so many other ways to be accessible, which
Yes,
I
me
have
too, by
done.
the way.
Yeah, and I love it. But she was telling me that with her master's degree in nutrition, and I think she had something else in there. I think she was getting reimbursed like 180 a session, and now yeah,
What?
yeah. Yes, I know. So she was getting reimbursed $180 a session, and our
Mhm.
sessions were 30 minutes long.
Mhm. Wow,
Okay.
that is insane.
Yes. And so I sat there and I was like doing the math in my head because I was like,
Mhm.
I've never taken insurance, but I know for the most part, the highest insurance reimbursement rates are
Mhm.
like maybe 120, and that's for a
Uh-huh.
60-minute session,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Which
right?
they're also
So
taking away too sometimes.
totally. So
Mm.
now, if you look at that, we are being paid $80 an hour
Mhm.
for the
Yeah.
exact same, like, it's a different degree, I know that, but it's the
Mhm.
same level of care. It's the same graduate degree
Yes.
status. It's the same requirements after to gain licensure. It's the
Mhm.
same CEU requirements. But
Mhm.
I just like sat there and I was like,
Wow.
are we insane? Like, and then
Oh,
then
that's
you
so
think about
heartbreaking to hear.
yes. But then you think about the fact that, like, literally everything in the world right now is
Mhm.
built off of mental health. And
Mhm.
the foundation we have of mental health, not very strong, right?
Absolutely.
Which I
Oh my
think is
gosh,
a
it's
huge part.
trash.
Yes,
Mhm.
which is a huge part of why we have all
Mhm.
of these things,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
And so I'm like,
exactly.
so you're not going to invest in mental health, and we don't
Mhm.
care about mental health. We also
Yes.
don't care about the people who do care about mental health, right?
Yes,
Because by the
exactly.
way, you should work for free.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's so wild. That's so wild. And like, and just to make it clear, I'm actually a private pay clinician right now. I might accept Medicaid when we become a behavioral health agency with Divergent Minds Collective. But like, it's so bizarre. None of the pathways are good, and I do truly empathize with therapists that are just burned out and say, "No, I just need to I need to make a living because the work we do is so emotionally intense and so heavy, and then we just roll from session to session all day, seeing like 6 or 7 clients, carrying like 6 or 7 different stories, and then we have to wash, rinse, and repeat for the entire work week, and so it is just like insane to hear about the difference in reimbursement rate because if we play that out, that means that nutritionist would get reimbursed $360 an hour for our 89 $90 hour reimbursement, and we're holding all of the story and the trauma. So like what's a dissonant, like ridiculous stance in the United States? I'm gonna think about that after this. It's upsetting.
Then the thing to think about it, right? If we think about like the hierarchy of needs and we think about the fact that like, food, shelter, clothing, right? Like love and care, the bottom of the pyramid. And then we're asking therapists to not get paid so they can't feed themselves and they can't afford adequate shelter and they can't have time with their loved ones. And then we know what that kind of trauma does to our nervous systems. And so we're asking therapists to be chronically dysregulated to support other people who are chronically dysregulated while no one has enough of anything that they need. But oh, by the way, don't tax the billionaires.
Don't tax the billionaires. Isn't that amazing? Like that smokescreen that they've put up, of like where they've just made it more of a class war in the middle class and lower class, and we're and still like that's true power, right? To be like, oh yeah, people don't even consider me, so that's we could talk for hours and hours too. Given that we are now in a recession and in a really difficult space, like post pandemic, I'm curious, like how you've been taking care of yourself as a clinician.
Great question. So I think when I started private practice, so I went through a lot of different levels of care in Massachusetts, and I loved it. I loved all of them for different reasons. I miss residential, like it's nobody's business, but I know that like where I'm at in life right now is not the residential space, but nostalgia, right? Um, so when COVID hit, I was like 2.5-ish years in a private practice. And I thankfully had like a handful of people that I had connected with that also were kind of doing the private pay route and they really wanted to like, do their own practices, which I was like, that's great. So really I spent tons of time like leaning on them and talking about different business stuff and like, really trying to like invest in myself. I went back to CrossFit. There's all these pieces that I was like, I should do that and I should do this. And I think that when the world gets chaotic, I often find myself reinvesting in myself because I feel like that is the one thing I can control when we're talking about all of the chaos that's happening. And so, like, reading a lot of books, going to like virtual conferences, like really just like doing all that stuff. And at the same time, like reconnecting with like nature, right? Like that was a huge part of like my thing. But I do think that we are still in like a recovery phase post COVID. And so I think that the world has dramatically shifted because of COVID. And that has been really interesting because I feel like a lot of other pandemics have been more short lived, but I feel like COVID has really substantially shifted things that I feel like we're going to be in recovery for a long time. And so I feel more exhausted. I think and I have a lot of fun things going on, so I feel like those give me life, but I think when I think about like COVID particularly and the pandemic piece, I'm just like when are we going to be able to kind of like be at the level we were at before? And I don't have an answer for that.
Absolutely. I know it's so hard to maintain hope through that. Yeah, it is really, really difficult. And I do think that the pandemic radically shifted things. I started my private practice in February of 2020, by the way. And so it was a very weird first year of private practice. I was accepting insurance at that time, and that was great because I don't think I would have been able to find too many clients otherwise. Yeah, it is super interesting, and then I love that lesson of like shifting back to yourself as a locus of control, and like how do we reinvest in ourselves. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but one of the themes that I've noticed in teenagers and specifically launching adult age right now, so like 19 to 21s, is those that age group seems to have been fundamentally stunted in an initiative way, where I don't think like little kids were impacted as much, but it seems like that young adult, like late adolescence, has had a really hard time like figuring out how to move forward in life. And so I have like a handful of cases consistently where it's adults that are stuck at home with their parents because they can't figure it out. And I say that with so much compassion.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when COVID was happening and kind of a little bit after COVID, I think there was a lot of conversation about like, oh, this population was really impacted and like this population was really impacted. And the hill that I will die on with this is that I think we were all impacted in very different ways, right? When you think about like the school shutdowns for kids that were like preschool to like fifth grade, you think about the school shutdowns for high school age kids, right? And like what they lost or what that took away from them, drastically different, but the impact isn't any less.
Yeah, exactly. It is so interesting to think about that from like an Ericksonian development lens of like when the pandemic happened in terms of the age of the kids and how that really messed up that developmental stage for a lot of kids. Because we had to, again, we go back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and safety was the priority, and we had to throw out the rest of the stuff during the pandemic and lockdown. So super interesting themes, and we'll continue seeing them, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing when I feel like kind of the post-pandemic stuff, I'm just like, I don't know if it's going to be enough in 10 years. Like, I don't know how caught up we are going to be to where we were and to like, it seems like to get everyone back and to get everyone into the space of learning the skills they needed that they missed out during COVID. I'm like, what is that, a 20-year process? Like, what are we, and then to speak to the folks that like are having a really hard time shifting out of like their bio home or their home environment, like definitely seen that a lot. And I think it's so tricky because like really that's one of my assessment questions when I'm like meeting with someone for the first time. I'm just like really want to understand like what you missed out on during COVID, because I feel like sometimes that's like almost where we have to start, right? It's like if you're missing this key critical thing, like the 16 to 18-year-olds, what did they miss out on? Friend time, parties, prom, right? Like all these like study parties, anything like that, driving, right? Because the driving school shut down. So like they missed out on that key part of freedom, autonomy, independence, decision making, voice, right? And so like I don't know, I just think it's a very vast thing that I don't think we'll truly have a handle on until like 10, 15 years from now about what we really.
And it's published in a textbook about United States history. Absolutely. Yeah, it is super interesting to think about. What a weird time to be a therapist, too.
And I think believe, if I can say this, that teens are their own specialty and that
Yes,
they don't deserve to be lumped in with like child or like young adult, because I
absolutely.
feel like I get so annoyed when I go to a training and they're like, yeah, we're going to talk about teens. And then they spend 3 seconds talking about teenagers. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is an entire developmental phase that you are literally ignoring.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How awful and like how lumping. I 100% believe it's its own specialty. And I have loved most of the teen providers that I've ever met. And so this is continuing that trend. I really appreciate it, Charity.
I love it. I love it. Well, you are welcome back at any point in time. I will hit you up. I have other things that I feel like I'd love to talk about.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
can talk about crusty dogs and armadillos and all the
Next,
things.
I will send you a crusty dog picture today.
Oh my gosh, please do. Please do.
Yeah,
I
I
would
will.
love to see. Would love to see a crusty dog. But Rachel, Dr. Rachel,
Oh, Rachel's
Rachel.
great.
Thank you so much for being here today and for chatting and for sharing your story about how you became who you are now. And I know that the kids that you work with are so lucky to have you. So
Yeah,
I can't wait to have you back again.
I really appreciate you. It's such a delight to meet you and to hear about like all of our shared paths and makes me suspicious of like, are we all the same as teen therapists? But that's a fun realization more than anything. And I love learning about you as a teenager and learning about what you do and how you think about things. So thanks for having this awesome podcast, by the way.
Yes, yours are welcome. I was going to say, coming, let's say 2027, we'll have a survey out to all the teen therapists about like, all the things we can better understand it. Because I'm also a nerd and I love data.
Exactly. We can make it happen.
I will hit you up. We are going to do it.
I like it. All right. I will talk to you soon and I hope you have a really good day.
You too. Thank you so much. Bye.